Welcome to City Hall. We'll get started this morning with our invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Tom Jones of the City Rescue Mission is here. I'll ask him to lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman Pat Ryan to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
Let's bow our heads, please. Heavenly Father, we stand here this morning in awe of the great things, God, that you are allowing to take place in our city. Lord, we thank you for the leaders, God, that you have positioned for such a time as this. Lord, we pray, God, that your blessing would continue to be over the city and over these leaders. We pray, God, that the proceedings today, God, would be done according to your plans and purposes, Lord, and that your peace would just fill this place. In Jesus' name, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A couple of proclamations this morning. We'll start with E-Cycle Day. Jim Lynn, our operations manager with our Solid Waste Management Division of the Utilities Department, is here, and he's brought some people from Waste Management. Jim, come on down. We have a proclamation. I'll ask the clerk to read it as we get settled.
Whereas the City of Oklahoma City Solid Waste Management Division, Waste Management, and LG Electronics have partnered to offer Oklahoma City residents a convenient way to dispose of used, unwanted, obsolete, or damaged consumer electronic products in an environmentally sound manner. Whereas Metro Oklahoma City residents are invited to drop off and recycle any brand of unwanted, obsolete, or damaged consumer electronic products and computer equipment free of charge between 8 and 4 Saturday, August 21st at the State Fair Park. And whereas the drop-off event will make e-cycling easy and convenient since residents remain in their air-conditioned vehicles while crew members collect all acceptable electronic products from trucks or pickup beds. And whereas e-cycling allows useful materials such as glass, plastic, and metal to be recycled for use in the manufacture of other products, and recycling electronics minimizes the amount of hazardous waste in the landfills and the extraction of the new raw materials from the earth. Whereas the e-cycling drop-off event is a proactive effort to help Oklahoma City residents responsibly dispose of end-of-life consumer electronics and computer equipment in an environmentally responsible manner. Now, therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the City of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim August 21st as E-Cycling Day in Oklahoma City.
Let's show our appreciation for E-Cycling Day coming up this week. Jim, you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're terribly pleased to have our partners in this event, LG Electronics and Waste Management's Recycle America, assist us in this extremely important event for Oklahoma City. So we'd encourage all residents to get their e-waste, their electronics that are discarded at home, to the fairgrounds on Saturday between 8 and 4. So it's going to be a great event. Thank you.
And just to be clear, what we're not saying is you shouldn't be throwing your computer equipment away in the Big Blue.
That is correct, sir. It's considered hazardous waste under the regulations, and we prefer that to be handled the environmentally responsible way, and this is the way to do it.
And at 15th and South Portland, we have a facility where people can drop it off.
Yes, sir. That in addition to the event this coming weekend at the State Fair Park. Yes, our household hazardous waste facility will accept these materials as well anytime that they're open. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council.
You bet. Let's show our appreciation one more time. This Saturday at the State Fairgrounds. And doing so would be, I think, a statement of character. And by coincidence, the month of September is a month of character. And grab my notes here. Earlene Smith here with the Character Council. Don't you all come up? We have a proclamation to talk about September being a month of character in the United States, and Oklahoma City wants to be right at the front and center of that.
Whereas the people of our city recognize the importance of honorable character qualities, and whereas the City Council of the City of Oklahoma City passed a resolution on September 18, 2001, approving the establishment of Oklahoma City as a city of character, and pledging to do all in their power to promote positive character qualities and encourage others to do likewise. And whereas we desire to build upon our heritage and commitment to good character development, and whereas we are committed to making our community a place overflowing with individuals who actively exhibit good character, resulting in a community where everyone works together so that families are healthy and united, faith-based organizations are compassionate, education is effective, businesses are successful with honor, government is serving the citizens, homes and streets are safe, and citizens care for one another. Whereas the emphasis of positive character qualities in every sector of our community can only occur as individuals commit themselves to exemplifying character in their personal lives and inspiring others to do the same. Now, therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim the month of September 2010 as the 7th annual Month of Character in Oklahoma City.
You're welcome. Let's show our appreciation for the month of character.
Well, we certainly appreciate this. The Month of Character, our organization is made up of the 7 sectors that it takes to make up a community, and we're always busy cultivating character within the community, and this month we will be kind of showcasing the Character Council to the communities around as to who we are, what we do, and also seeking sponsorships for our various events. Thank you very much.
Dr. Smith, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Once more time, let's show our appreciation and our salute to character. We're on item 4 of the council agenda. Item 4 is the Journal of Council Proceedings. Item A is to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for August 3rd, 2010, and item B is to approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for July 20th, 2010. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions on the journal? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We're on to item 5. This is request for uncontested continuances.
We have one uncontested continuance that's on the agenda on page 29. It's item 10B. But we also have several others this morning on page 19. Item 8A3, PUD 1223. The applicant has requested a continuance to September 28th, 2010.
That's A3?
8A3.
Okay. And the new date is?
September 28th, 2010.
All right.
And then on to page 22, item 8K1, item H, 1330 Northeast 15th Street, request that that item be stricken to rework for property maintenance. And then item 8L1, item H, 2329 Northwest 15th Street, request that that item be stricken. The owner has secured. Item J, 1135 Southwest 20th Street, request that the item be stricken. The owner has secured. Item L, 2133 Southwest 26th Street, request that item be stricken to re-notify for additional violations. Item O, 1504 Southwest 64th Street, the item be stricken. The owner has secured. Item P at 8101 Northwest 89th Street, the item be stricken. The owner has secured. And item Q, 1200 Northwest 92nd Street, the item be stricken. The owner has secured.
All right. Any other requests for uncontested continuances?
Yes, Mayor, I have one. On page 26, we would request that item 8V be stricken. We'll put that back on in 2 or 4 weeks.
That's B as in boy?
V as in victory.
Okay. All right, we're going to strike item 8V. Okay. Anything else? Well, then we'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. We have 6 items. We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions about the MFA? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Adjourn OCMFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority. We have 5 items. Okay, any comments or questions on the PPA? Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Adjourn OCPPA, convene as the Oklahoma City Environmental Assistance Trust. There is 1 item. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions about the EAT? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We'll adjourn OCEAT and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. Any individual considerations? Let me get a second first. I didn't actually hear. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Pat, go ahead.
6Y, Yankee.
All right.
And 6 Alpha, Echo, AE.1.
We're also fortunate this morning to have a couple of people in to speak about item AQ. This is the cultural campus concept, and James Pickle and Donna Reinhardt are both here. Do you all want to come forward, or have you all drawn straws to see which one of you would speak? It's going to be Donna. So did she win the drawing straws, or did she lose? She's just better. Okay. Donna, come on forward.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for so much for allowing us to come before you today to present this very exciting cultural plan for Oklahoma City. During the past 10 years, the Cultural Development Corporation of Central Oklahoma, better known as CDC, has created an identity for itself by helping the arts agencies and community organizations dare to dream big with their plans. The CDC has focused on specific tasks such as raising money, creating new art venues, and improving existing venues, and strengthening communications among all involved parties. Things have gone well. The cultural life of Oklahoma City looks brighter and more diverse than ever before. This sort of inspired growth rests on the foundation that carefully built over time by individuals and organizations devoted to the ideals of arts and culture. Momentum, once generated, cannot be put on hold. To guide steady cultural progress from now through 2014, the CDC proposes a series of creative strategies for Oklahoma City, and that's what you see in front of you. The dynamic nature of cultural growth means the plan, the various people and organizations involved, and the financial partners will continuously evolve. It is impossible to know in advance of the exciting and subtle turns that the strategies for tomorrow will follow. Many arts, community, and city leaders invested many hours into putting this plan together. As the cultural landscape changed for the plan, for the city, the plan was designed to follow. As the consultant, that's what I am, I met with the leadership of the city, the Chamber, CVB, CDC, and all the major art organizations, Allied Arts, to get feedback on each of the strategies. I met with Kathy O'Connor, who was very helpful in having Russell Kloss and his staff review the plan. I'd like to personally thank her for this, since we were able to adapt the strategies to many of the city's plans that are in progress. The CDC wanted to feel certain that the strategies were designed for advancing the Oklahoma City's cultural agenda. During the next 3 years, the CDC will oversee the progress of each identified group of strategy implementers as they work through the bright ideas and the bold moves under each of the strategies. You will note on page 5, that's where the creative strategies start. I'll read those to you quickly, just so you can get a broad brush of what those are. Creative Strategy 1 is to entice, attract, and entertain, and that's to present Oklahoma City as a destination place, cultural destination place for not only the residents, but for visitors. Creative Strategy 2 is to maximize what exists. That is to forge a wider path for collaborating with city and county government. Creative Strategy 3 is to energize the atmosphere, appreciate and improve the existing cultural network. Creative Strategy 4 is to amplify lifelong learning, and that's to provide opportunities for art education across the age spectrum. Creative 5 is to support and sustain. We have to do that, don't we? That's to determine all the avenues of support for the cultural and arts organizations. And as you can see under those strategies, each strategy has a whole list of bright ideas and bold moves. That's where the individual implementer teams will start to implement that strategy. One of the other things that CDC is responsible for doing is to make sure that an economic impact study is done. And I think on page 3 you see some highlights for that economic impact study that was commissioned by CDC and performed by Americans for the Arts. There's over 4,000 full-time jobs, equivalent jobs supported by the arts organizations. There's $4.5 million in income generated to local governments by the arts groups and their audiences, and over 1.8 million attendees to local arts and culture. 45% of those are non-residents. And of course, always there's over and above the ticket price, at least $32 spent in the community for each event. The cultural life of Oklahoma City is growing more diverse than ever before. The CDC wants to continue that growth by providing a comprehensive voice to the leadership of Oklahoma City on behalf of the arts and culture organizations. We're here asking for the City Council to accept this plan so that we can move it forward.
Comments or questions from
I have
council?
James Pickle here to answer any questions.
Your Honor, yes.
Just the tough ones.
This is not a tough question. How do we pay for it? Have you put a price tag on your strategies at all, an estimate? I realize it don't be price. Okay. Have you done any investigation as possible sources of funding outside the city? Because I remember when I was 2 or 3 careers ago, I had a little bit of went to a couple of CDC meetings, and we talked about some regional tax efforts. Are those still ongoing, or?
We continue to look at them, but it doesn't appear that this is the right environment to pursue those. We do have some foundation support. We do have some monies from the city still in our account, and we will be using those dollars to push this plan forward.
Because the strategies are really exciting. Just glancing at them here, you've got some really great points.
And I think as we pull the implementers together and they start their work, there'll be a little seed money provided for them to get started, but you will see money follow that.
Will the CDC then sort of act as the overall
Yes.
coordinator on this?
For oversight. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question. Living here in Oklahoma City, and you continue to hear the conversations about cultural and the arts, and it just really amazes me that there has been so much that's been given from the African American race in this city, the contributions of great people. And yet and still, every time I start looking at this, it just really kind of offends me, because you never see a real display of any of the contributions of the African American race. And although I see in these bright ideas, the name African American is listed with Hispanic and Asian cultures, but it would think that as long of a history and the trials and tribulations and the triumphs that's been made and the legacies that was left by some of the great African Americans in this city, even from the city government, that we really don't display. And it seems as if that there is not a major concern as it relates to the those individuals and the African American race. And it just kind of, bothers me when we come to, when these issues come up and we're asking for support from the city, and I would be remiss if I did not say my concerns. I don't know if anyone else has that same concern, but I represented a population of people that continues to echo the very same sentiments. And I would just like to say that if we're going to do this, if we're going to be really about the culture of this city, let's be fair and equitable as it relates to the arts and the cultural display of different races and ethnicity in our city.
I agree totally with that.
Any other comments or questions from the council? All right, Donna, thank you. Come now.
Can we have an acceptance?
It'll be voted in
Okay.
momentarily with the
Okay.
rest of the consent document.
Thanks.
Pat, you had some items you wanted to discuss or some questions you wanted to ask.
Just a couple of minor quick questions, Your Honor. Thank you very much. On number 6Y, this is a project, or a great project, to replace some of our signal light heads with LED lights. And one of the advantages is brightness, but a significant advantage is the lack of, or the lesser energy that they consume compared to existing lights. It's something like, I can't remember exactly, 150 versus 12, 150 watts versus 12 watts. And my question was, I'm probably stepping on my own retirement salary, but is there a way we can get a rate adjustment from the electric suppliers to these lights that recognize the fact that we're using less electricity? I know it's a small amount, but as many signal lights as we have across the city, if we ultimately replace them all with LED heads, which I hope we will, it could add up to quite a bit of energy that we're paying for, not using.
I'll be glad to contact OG&E and find the answer to that.
As long as it doesn't affect the retirement plan, go ahead.
I'll make a note of that.
Thank you. The second question is, this is I don't understand the wording on this. This is an easement granted to OG&E, and the purpose is to provide an easement to remove an old tower base in the Oklahoma River. And why would we need to give them an easement to remove something that's already there?
We'll have to find that out for you probably. It is a little.
Which item are you?
It's item AE1, and it just struck me as the wording was a little bit strange there.
Councilman, I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to find out.
It's not a big deal. I was just curious. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Any other items under the consent docket for discussion?
Mayor, I guess if I could just mention, and this is item AI, and it's the announcement of a $1 billion grant from the U.S. Economic Development Administration for I2E and our Economic Development Trust to be able to work on incubating new businesses. That's very exciting for the city and the trust, and for so very appreciative of the efforts to make that happen.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the consent docket? Well, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote. Passed unanimously. All right, we're on to the concurrence docket. All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any individual considerations on the consent docket? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We're on to item 8A. These are items that require a separate vote. We start with a series of zoning cases. The first is in Ward 5. It's an ABC issue at 11641 Southwestern Avenue. Is the applicant here? Okay. Are there any protests to items 8A1? All right, how about a motion then? We'll move this one forward.
Second.
Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Mayor, it's my understanding that the people need the emergency on this matter, and I'd move it.
Okay. We have a motion on the emergency. We have enough to vote. Cast your votes, and the emergency passes 8-0. We're on to item 8A2. This is a zoning case in Ward 2. It's also an ABC issue. The address is 2809 Northwest Expressway. Stan?
Thank you, Mayor. This is the new Hilton Garden Hotel next to the Holiday Inn Express on Northwest 39th and May. Jim Thompson, developer. Everything's in accord. All the dots are dotted. Is there any opposition to this today, other than Jim being here to support it? I'd move for approval.
All right. Cast your votes on item 8A2. Passed unanimously. Item 8A3 has been continued until September 28. Item 8A4 is a zoning case in Ward 3. The address is 1547 and 1601 South Portland, and then a couple of miscellaneous addresses on Southwest 15th Street. Larry?
Yes, Your Honor. I think the applicant is represented by Tim Johnson. And Tim, if you would come forward, and while he's coming forward, a number of us feel that the river from the original maps has a tremendous potential for the future of Oklahoma City, and this particular piece of property lies on the river. So what I've asked Tim to do is just to give a very brief synopsis of what this is, because it fits in the component of developing the river from its entire length.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tim Johnson with Johnson & Associates. Here on behalf of the applicant, I brought with me one of our concept plans just to give you a brief rundown of the project. It's a unique piece of property adjacent to the river on the north, and then they have a piece of property on the south that's adjacent to the city facilities at 15th and Portland, and a landfill on their south. So we have developed the PUD in several tracks. This farthest south tract is set up to allow for some buffering and allows for some different architectural treatment on the building that would kind of diffuse the impact of the industrial uses around it, but trying to create a potential venue for a large meeting place, something that would correlate with the activities on Meridian in the hotel area. And then north of 15th Street on the river side, again, the property has some difficulties in that the existing floodway from the river master plan study actually encroaches into the developable portion of the property. So part of this PUD allows for us to develop into that as long as FEMA allows us to move that. So that'll be the next step in the process. It's a mixed-use development, allows for commercial, residential, office, with a lot of restrictions. We met for the last year plus with the Scenic River Overlay staff and the committee, and have worked very close with the River Trust through Pat Downs, and have come up with a PUD we believe that restricts and meets all the guidelines as the Scenic River Overlay has outlined. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Comments or questions?
There are no protests.
Just a quick question. Excuse me, Tim. Do you have any sense of the timing when this might do?
They wanted to get through this process before they even started marketing the property, so it's not even started marketing yet.
Okay, so it's a year or so away at least.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
No one has signed up to object. Unless the council has any questions, I move for approval.
All right. Cast your votes on item 8A4. Passed unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. Item 8B is a zoning case in Ward 5. Address is 530 Southwest 119th Street.
Mayor,
Yeah.
I've had some communication with Councilman Walters on this matter. His planning commissioner was in favor of this, and I'm going to move its approval.
Okay. You have a second? All right. Any comments or questions on item 8B?
Subject to the technical evaluation.
Is your motion
Yes,
subject to
yes,
technical
yes, ma'am.
evaluations? Okay. Cast your votes. It passed unanimously.
Also, I'd like to move the emergency on it.
All right. Cast your votes on the emergency, and it passes.
Mayor, the Dennis Box on behalf of the applicant. The only thing I would request is a clarification. The staff report deals with two of the TEs that the neighborhood is fine with, and we would ask that we not be required to put a fence between our building and the neighborhood. It's an open greenbelt area right now. In fact, the building's built, so they didn't want to have to put screening up. Neighborhood agreed, and they like the open area. This is part of the Greenbrier area. And then the sign will look exactly as presented within the SPUD. So I just want to make sure that was clear.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Dennis.
I think we need to amend the motion because that was approved with the staff's technical evaluation.
I have a copy of a letter from the Neighborhood Association agreeing to exactly what Dennis said. Does that amend the motion?
I think we need to amend it to delete technical evaluations 1 and 2.
To permit the sign to be as presented and to eliminate the TE about the screen, because the neighborhood specifically didn't like that idea.
All right. Is that a motion, Pete?
Yes.
All right. Have a second? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Now the emergency.
Passes. On item 8C, it's a name change in Ward 5, Southwest 152nd Place. Comments or questions on item 8C? Do we have a second? Second? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8D continues our efforts to update our language on the use of the recreational use of our lakes.
I'd move approval.
Okay. All right. Cast your votes on item 8D. Passes unanimously. Item 8E is from the Traffic Commission. Some no parking anytime signs. It's in Ward 2, Sam.
Move approval.
All right. Cast your votes on 8E. Passes unanimously. Item 8F and G deals with the Western Avenue bid. It's our annual approval of the assessment and the roll. Comments or questions on this? Sam, you all right with this? Okay. Any comments or questions on this item? So we're voting on item 8F first. All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. How about a motion on item 8G then? Cast your votes, and it passes also. Item 8H updates our sign ordinances. This is a public hearing.
We're going to need the emergency.
On 8H, we'll need the emergency.
Western
Okay, back up. Item 8G, we need the emergency. All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. All right, now we're on to item 8H. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Susan Miller with the Planning Department. I wanted to bring attention to a couple of amendments that we'll be bringing to the third hearing of adoption for these two ordinances, which will be on the 31st. Minor amendments that having to do with sidewalk signage, A-frame signs, which you're familiar with, the signs that sit on the sidewalk. We were contacted by the Oklahoma City Convention and Visitors Bureau about looking at that a little bit closer. We are making minor amendment to A-frame signs to increase the height, the maximum height from 36 inches to 48 inches. And we also added Springer signs, a definition, which are very similar to A-frame, although A-frame is a bit bulkier. And does this Springer signs are just a sign attached with springs from a base. So a little less bulkier. Because of that, they could be a little larger. So these are signs that you'll find at the Cox Convention Center, and there's a few in Bricktown as well. The maximum height, we're going to ask that those be 56 inches maximum and 8 square feet of the sign. And those are the amendments we're going to be bringing forward on the 31st for adoption.
Okay. Any comments or questions for Susan today? All right. Those amendments will be back up. Is that in 2 weeks when we try to adopt it? All right. Right now, though, we do need to vote on item 8H, do we not? Okay. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And then item 8I is a companion item. Also a public hearing on the item Susan was addressing. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8J is our second hearing on the seatbelt restraints. We had a presentation last meeting, as you'll recall. Cast your votes on item 8J. Passed unanimously. Item 8K is a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under any item listed under 8K? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8L is unsecured structures. Is there anyone here wishing to speak under any item listed under 8L?
Mayor, I'd like to look at, if they have the photos, of item L1D.
Which one?
L1D. It's 4721 South Harvey. We can put it up. I'd like to look at it.
Item D, 4721 South Harvey.
It's on as unsecured, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's good enough. I've seen enough.
Okay.
No
Thanks.
more.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions on any item listed under 8L? We have a motion? And second? Cast your votes, and they are unsecured. Item 8M is to ratify the police chief's request for a burn grant. Cast your votes on item 8M. Passed unanimously. Item 8N is a list of 3 revocable rights-of-way permits. The first that we'll vote on is for the Bricktown Unplugged event coming up this weekend on Flaming Lips Alley, just east of Mickey Mantle Drive. It's in Ward 7. Skip, you okay with this? All right, cast your votes on item N1. Passed unanimously. Item N2 is also in Ward 7. It's called the Let's Move River Sport Challenge, and it takes place southeast 6th Street down to Byers. That must be down by the boathouse.
Move it.
Okay, cast your votes on N2. Passed unanimously. And item 8N3 is an event for the Plaza District called the 2010 Plaza District Festival, and Kristen Vales is here to give us a little more detail. Good morning, Kristen.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. We will need your name and address for the record.
2228 Northwest 15th, 73107.
All right.
Kristen Vales. I'm just here in support and representation of the Plaza District Festival. On October 9th, we're going to shut down 16th Street and have a neighborhood block party and festival. We'll shut down 16th and have arts booths, live music, performance, and invite the neighborhood and community out to celebrate our local artistic talent and celebrate the progress the district has made in the last few years. And I really just want to invite you guys out and celebrate all the district's progress that we've made. We've really got some great new businesses out and some great things going on. So,
well,
any
it's
questions?
a chance for us to thank you for all the work that you and the association has done. The Plaza District's done tremendously well.
Thank you so much. And
Congratulations.
in return, we really appreciate the support that the city has for our district.
And this date is October 9th when you're going to hold your block party.
Yes, from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Okay. Any questions for Kristen? Yeah, Sam.
Mayor, just a comment on the second Friday night, Kristen. It's a sight to behold, the second Friday nights. To me, the last time I was over there, it was like walking through the fairgrounds in the middle of the night. It's just that much activity. Streets, wide sidewalks, everything being utilized. I really thought it was an annual event the Friday I was over there. It was just that big.
Yeah, just for everyone who's not sure, every second Friday is live on the plaza. It's from 7 to 11 p.m., and it's just a little mini festival. We don't shut down the street. We just open the businesses late, and we've really got a lot of great attention and a lot of great people coming out to support. Thank you so much.
This is a really fun festival. I've been for the last couple of years, and so put October 9th on your calendar. It's a terrific day. And given that, I would move approval of the request.
All right. How about a second? Cast your votes. Passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. All right. Item 8O is a part of the MAPS 3 process, as you know from previous experience with MAPS and MAPS for Kids, is to look at a program coordinator. Eric Wenger is here to kind of help us with the conversation, and keeping in mind that for the vast majority of this council, hiring a program consultant is a new part of the process. So, Eric, why is it necessary, and what can you tell us about this part of it?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Similar to the original MAPS 1 and MAPS 2 projects, we initiated a program consulting, at least service, to supplement what staff is able to provide. Obviously, as we go into many of these complicated projects, the need for plan review services, for cost estimating services, also the services for just things that are unknown and unforeseen as we move through this process are needed. And so we're at that point now in the MAPS 3 program to initiate these services for a program consultant to assist further city staff as we move forward. This item went to the advisory board this past meeting at the end of July. We brought them up to speed on the process of how we select consultants. We also had a resolution that they adopted for you today recommending its approval as we initiate selection with an advertisement that we would hope to send out this week following your approval of the resolution that's in your packet as well. But with that, a similar service that we provided before, it would be similar to what ADG is providing on Maps for Kids, which you might be more familiar with the recent activities on Maps for Kids. We do not have a contract, obviously, at this time. That's something that will go into the negotiation phase once we go through and finalize selection, shortlist, and interviews. But with that, I can answer any other questions that you might have.
What types of services do these companies provide? Is it financial? Is it planning? Is it all of the above?
It really is all of the above. Obviously, we have a well-seasoned staff here at the city that has gone through two major programs, and we have a lot of the original members of the MAPS team. But there still are some areas that we're not experts in, and I would just say as we talk about peer plan review, when we actually develop a set of plans for a project, something that's hundreds of pages, lots of details, it's in our best interest to engage a local architect or engineer to help us review those, make sure that they are constructible. They're also able to provide professional cost consulting and cost estimating services. And we have this at our disposal then to engage various firms that are experts in those areas to ensure to us as we go out to bids on these projects in the future that they're going to be in line with the budgets that we're establishing here at the council level. They will also assist us primarily as we ramp into MAPS 3 in creating an overall master plan, so to speak. Obviously, we have some general discussion and some general items that have been adopted on the 8 projects, but this will help us formalize those a little bit better, help us validate the budgets that have already been established through the vote and through some of the early documentation, and give us that comfort level as we get ready to proceed, full steam ahead on MAPS 3.
Your Honor, a couple of quick questions, Eric. First of all, do you have a feel for what this might cost? Rough idea?
I don't, and I think it's going to be very subject to the level of service that we desire. I think if we use as a starting point, if we talk about the Maps for Kids projects, a program that was nearly $700 million, so similar size overall, we had a contract that was around $16 million for the 10-year program for this consultant. I would hate to render that that's going to be the exact same contract or the same level of service, but we're going to go through that in detail. But it's a significant scope of work. It's obviously a very important part of our process, but that would be something that we would definitely bring back to you for further review and approval as we go through that negotiation phase.
The second question is, do you have a feel for when you might be in position to award a contract?
If we are allowed to proceed this week and advertise for services, we would probably do that for 2 to 3 weeks. Shortlisting and such, I think that we could, in probably the 60 to 75-day time frame, have a consultant that we would be interviewing and preparing a contract for approval.
And will the projects be on hold essentially until this person or group is in place?
No, we've actually, as you're going to see through the advisory board and what we're preparing for their agenda this month and will be coming to this council at your next meeting, is proceeding with hopefully site selection services for the new convention center, going ahead and formalizing the process for park property acquisition and some of those things that are known as a part of the MAPS 3 projects, proceeding on those in small steps until we can get this consultant on board. One of the things that we wanted to guard somewhat against with the advisory board is make sure that they've got the input provided to you as a part of their recommendation before we actually declare the first project or the second project and thus forth. So we are waiting and hoping that this master plan that we're asking to be created by the consultant include all those levels of detail, but we are proceeding in small steps on some smaller projects on MAPS 3.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Eric, what's the exit strategy on this contract? You mentioned it can be such a lengthy process. Is this annually reviewed, or what's the strategy there?
If we adopt the strategy on the previous contracts, we initiated them in phases, and so we could do that annually. That would definitely be one option where it has an annual renewal. The other is that it had certain limits on, monetary limits on, they would expend up to a certain amount and then have to seek additional authorizations. And so we would put some sort of a strategy in there to help manage that.
Okay. Yeah, Skip?
Why is it necessary to have one firm that is the consultant for a multitude of projects under this last MAPS, and especially as big and as small in comparison as some of the projects? It seems as if that some of these projects have such a standout identification in reference to the acquisition of the property downtown, the plan for the park, the plan for the convention center, and it's kind of amazing to me that what we thought in the minds of many of us as we discussed in reference to this whole agenda that was presented to the voters, that there would be some projects that voters could quickly identify and see that, you know, things were going to stand rather soon and be utilized, such as the senior citizens programs and the sidewalks. I just have a problem while we sitting here talking about the convention center as if it is the premier prima donna of all these projects that has to go forth first. And I don't understand, you know, and I looked at some of these projects from the MAP school, and I have some very, very serious problems with the planning. I have some problems when you go out and you look at, as I did last week, we got 2 schools that's got a major, major drainage problem. If they didn't identify the drainage issues before any construction was began, that's creating a mudslide on private property. I just don't have a whole lot of faith in this process of putting one company in charge of all of these projects, when in fact it seems like that's just, you know, where's the check and balance at when you do that?
So to respond, let me be real clear. The company won't be in charge of MAPS 3. You've charged me in the MAPS office to be in charge, and what we're asking for is just some professional guidance on certain areas when it comes to more or less what I've already visited on plan reviews and cost reviews, which we just don't have the in-house expertise to do those things. There are periodically reports that need to be created, something that we would expect to be at a much higher level, something for really more public consumption. We'd like to give our citizenry an opportunity to look at the projects as a whole, and when I speak about a master plan or a master guide to the program, looking at something more like the program implementation plan that you might be more familiar with MAPS for Kids, identifying the projects to a little greater level of detail, just so that we've got that assurance that the budgets that have been established are in fact correct and something that we can proceed on. We also want to make sure that we take things that we have in-house from our city budget and finance office, cash flow and sales tax collections, and manage those with the project cost as well, so that we make sure that we're operating not in a deficit, but we're actually utilizing that cash flow and proceeding forward in really a controlled manner. It's something that we're comfortable with, but I do want to give you that assurance that we're not handing off the torch to a third party to help us through MAPS 3. We're actually looking for them to support our office and more or less be an extension of city staff.
I think the other thing that's important to say here is that this consulting firm is the overall program consultant. We will be hiring separate individual A&E firms to help us plan and design and implement the individual projects, and that the firm that we select as program consultant will not be the A&E firm that's used, for example, to design the Central Park. So that we have that kind of third-party independent look, as Eric mentioned, a peer review for plans and construction drawings and all of the different elements, the cost, the budgets, all of those things that are going to be a part of this project. It's a very long-term relationship, and so it's important that we go through the process and begin the planning phases that are the first part of this, helping us prioritize and schedule the projects, to look at all the different variables that go into that, like cash flow on the sales tax revenues, so that we plan the budgets in accordance with the revenues that we receive, and all of the different elements about estimating cost and scope of the projects, and helping us manage the big projects as well as the small ones to stay within their budgets.
From a historical perspective, was it FSB that played this role in MAPS 1?
It was.
As our overall administrator?
Then the facilities group originally had the contract in Maps for Kids.
Right, okay.
Yes.
I talked with Mick briefly yesterday and a little more extensively with Kathy last evening, picking up on Councilman Kelly's concern about are we giving the kind of focus to some of these projects in the early stages that really we should expect and citizens should expect. I want to just spend a little time on one of the very specific projects. Kathy's reassured me that there is a way through this process to address this with the kind of focus that I think we need, but I'd like to just elaborate a bit. It's concerned me for some time that the senior wellness and aquatic centers not have been forgotten necessarily, but are just put aside. And my concern when I saw this was that in this general scheme of planning with this single consultant, with absolutely nothing in front of the consultant to start with in regards to our senior wellness centers, this could very likely get lost in the process. You know, when we look at the major projects, Urban Park, Convention Center, Transit, River Project, Fairgrounds, every one of those has some general basic scope of service. Every one of them certainly has a constituency and some stakeholders. They're going forward. The trails and the sidewalks are probably soon to be at a stage where they can move to implementation and engineering because they're laid out. They're pretty well laid out for us. But when we look at the wellness centers, and here's the Bible. This is the MAPS 3 book that's given to every new member that comes on the advisory committee. When you come to senior wellness centers, it's tab number 8, and there is just a tab. I mean, that's it. We have just a tab. My concern is, even in this early stage, that we get some very focused professional guidance, and that may take an A&E firm to do that. Again, before the design, Kathy talked about afterwards we will look to separate A&E firms for our plan and design in every one of these projects, and understand that we have to do that. This is a general oversight, but this oversight committee assisting staff is looking for the kind of professional guidance in each of these areas. Most of it is out there in these other 7 projects. There's none at this point on the table with regards to our senior wellness centers. We have centers that more than likely are not going to be able to operate with a subsidy of the city. They're going to take institutional partners to make them work. We can, in this early planning stage, begin to look at some of that planning, some of those partners, begin to build perhaps even a constituency for these services, begin to build some scope of work in the early stages. And I think in conjunction with this one contract, that we can build into it some very specific focus, specifically to address this one project that is really absent any of, again, the constituencies or any minimal scope of work at this time. It just hasn't had it. It's an idea, and it's an idea at this stage that I think needs some attention and focus before we get to the point that, well, we're going to have a separate A&E contract to plan and design. I'm suggesting before that time we need a good focus.
Don't you think part of the issue may be that we have no idea what those things are going to be like?
Yes.
We need to stop right now, and before we talk about A&Es, we need to decide what we want in these fitness centers. Do we want bridge lessons or weightlifting lessons or swimming pools or what have you?
And I think
we've not made that call, and I think that's probably why there's not more information.
And I think that would be part of this process, that we would bring in somebody that would help us begin to define those kinds of elements. And you define those elements as you go out and look at other cities as to what they've done, how they've done it, and then that begins to build into that the kind of scope of work that I think we can move to the next stage.
Well,
We've got a lot of work to do in this first stage.
Before we talk about an A&E having input into these projects, we need to define more of the function of the projects, what we want to do in those things before we go forward.
Well, we can't do everything at once. And my perception has been that we need the advisory board to somehow layer these projects and get some advice to us on the order of the projects before we start getting too far down the road. I think what Sam's pointing out, though, that's worth further discussion is the idea that most of these MAPS projects kind of have champions, local champions. Most of them are groups of people. The Senior Wellness Centers was really a council-generated concept. It was the 9 of us who were largely pushing that as something that this city should proceed with. And for that reason, it could get lost in the shuffle. If the advisory board is listening to these interest groups, it could get left behind. I see where you're going for. I don't know that expanding the concept of this consultant that we're talking about today is necessarily the place to plug it in. But I think what you're saying is something we need to discuss and figure out how to avoid, so that the advisory board is getting input. Maybe it comes from the council, or maybe it comes from staff on the senior wellness centers and direction. Do we want to open all 4 or 5 of these at once? Do we want to do one at a time? Those types of decisions between the advisory board and this council have to be made. Yeah, Larry, and then Pete.
Eric, let me ask you a question. In presentations to the advisory board, and the advisory board has had, 3 meetings?
Yes.
Okay. You have had briefings on a number of the different MAPS projects, but up to this point, we have not received a briefing on the senior wellness centers.
That's correct.
Okay. In your strategy at this point, is there a time when you were planning to do that and to get that ball rolling, to bring the advisory committee up to speed on the senior wellness centers?
And if I may answer that more generally, I concur. There are a lot of questions on some of these projects, and there is some information, over the past 2 years that's been generated either by council or third parties, and we've done our best as staff to collect really every available document that's pertaining to any of the 8 projects. And yes, the senior wellness centers probably has the fewest documents available. But our goal is to get all of that to the advisory board so that they can start understanding what's already been decided, if any, start formulating those recommendations. But clearly we're finding some gaps in the information, like the wellness centers. When we start talking about other items, say on the river projects, there are certain projects that are more understood than others. The fairgrounds and trails and sidewalks have some things that are a little more concrete. But we do want to bring everything up to a common level so that we can then move forward on each, more in a consistent fashion. But totally in agreement that there is a process that has not yet been engaged, that we do need to bring those senior wellness centers up to the same level as some of the other projects. And that is something that we will strive to work on and try to do so in short order.
Eric, Sam's idea that this might be the opportunity to kind of plug in that thought process. What's your response to, is this the time to make sure senior wellness centers don't get left behind, or is there another process you'd like to recommend?
It's really not our intent to prioritize one project over the other at this point. There are some early decisions that we feel comfortable about moving forward on. Obviously, there's some of the projects that we feel like we can short phase or at least start some certain processes on. But yes, I do think that it's something that we need to visit equally with the other 7 projects, and it's not one that's going to be forgotten by any means.
But as far as dealing with the program coordinator in that contract, do we need to do anything today to make sure that senior wellness centers are part of that scope?
As a part of our strategy, we don't. I would take that as a separate item and engage a consultant just for senior wellness centers, even if it's an early project, helping understand further partnerships, if it's going and looking at available sites, but that we really want to keep the project-specific criteria to the project. This consultant, again, is really just an extension of our staff. Somebody that can help us generalize some thoughts and processes and ideas, somebody that we can have fill in those gaps so that we don't have projects stalled at any point in the decade-long program that we're starting to plan. And so not related specifically, but definitely if we get to a point where we need some quick advice and they have that capability and it just happens to be on a project like this, we would have this consultant available to do such things as that.
So not engage such a person or firm at this time to be that standby person we're not talking about thinking of them even in the planning design phase, but just in this professional guidance stage where, Eric, we have little or nothing to bring forward.
So from more of a strategic planning standpoint, one of the things that staff is starting to outline, and there is very little information available, but we're starting to look at how we phase the overall program. Obviously, I don't believe that the projects are going to go in some sort of sequential order, Project 1 first, 2 second, number 8 last. I think that we're going to subdivide these projects into smaller projects. I think to answer Councilman Kelly's question, we are looking to do some early start projects with like trails and sidewalks where a lot of information is available and we could quickly get those out onto the street. But then there's some other projects that we obviously need to roll the ball on, like site acquisition and site selection on various projects, because a lot of the projects are interrelated. Wellness center is important, but obviously one of the things that we think is important is to go ahead and proceed on a formal site selection process for the convention center. It's tied to the Central Park, it's tied to the transit project, and there's such an interrelationship there that has to be answered so that we can proceed in short steps on each of those projects. But I do think we'll put a strategy together as well for the remaining projects, including the Wellness Center, on some early phasing, some early projects, some early strategies that we'll bring back to you for your consideration and approval. We're just not quite to that point yet, and we wanted to make sure that we collected all the information before we came to you with a recommendation.
Well, how do we get past the point that tab doesn't have anything in it for senior wellness centers?
So we would need to receive or engage a process to officially start that project. And with that, what we would do with this consultant, again, and to back up just a little bit, is to cash flow somewhat. Obviously, there are some projects that cost less than others, some that we're going to have to save our money for before we can begin. But the wellness centers, in my opinion, fit a model where we could do some early projects, whether it's partnership building, site selection, modeling, and things of that sort, where we could answer those questions and fill up tab 8. Go ahead and bring that up to the same level that the other projects are at, and then we can decide later, or at a time decided by this council, at what pace do we want to build those. So really it's multiple questions here, but we can quickly proceed on questions like this one in short order, and I think that's something we could begin in the next several months.
Okay.
Eric?
Yes, Skip, go ahead.
You know,
I'm sorry.
One of the issues
Pete, you're next.
that had been brought to me was what was pointed out, is that this has really never been a part of the discussion or equation in any degree in reference to the meetings that the advisory committee has had. Prior to the actual passing of this MAPS project, and then shortly thereafter, several of us have been contacted on a regular basis by institutions outside of the city of Oklahoma City, I'm going to say as far as government, but within the city of Oklahoma City, to engage in an opportunity to discuss the likelihood of being a partner with the senior projects. And of course, we can't make a commitment, but it would be good to have known that there had been some serious consideration in reference to maybe just one site acquisition of one of these facilities. You know, we know that we're not going to be able to start all of these projects at the same time. But I just feel like that there's a lot of opportunity that is looking us in the face, that if we don't seize the moment, that we're going to lose out on a great opportunity to financially enhance this project. And I just feel like that we need to go forward as aggressively as we can in reference to that concern, just as we have with the issue of the convention center. The convention center has been talked about for the last 5 years. It was the major project that was, of concern. And as stated, every last one of them have an already standing stakeholder that's there. But we have these projects that we went out to our citizens and we asked for their support. And as the mayor said, if it came from this council, there still should be just as strong of a stakeholder interest in reference to the senior citizens as there are those interests in reference to the fairgrounds and in reference to the Quarter Shore and the convention center. And I don't want to take any degree of playing it light in reference to those interests for that population of people in our community. And I'm going to be one of the strongest advocates for it. I have been, and I will continue to be. And they do have a stakeholder. And if it's this council, we're going to be just as strong about that as those individuals who are strong-minded about where the convention center should be. And I think we owe that to our citizens. Pete?
Well, I tend to agree with the concerns that the convention center has got all the emphasis, and the wellness centers have just been almost ignored. I think you have to look at the reality of this. The wellness centers and the sidewalks and the trails drug this dog of a convention center along with it. If you look at the polling data early on, the polling data was lousy on the convention center and never got better as we went through. What was good, the polling data that was good, the citizens' response was the senior centers, the parks, the trails, the sidewalks. So to just ignore it and say it doesn't have a constituency, it does have a constituency. It was the voters of this town. It was the lead dog in this thing, pulling the convention center along with it. We wouldn't have a convention center but for the fact that we forced some of these other projects into this thing. We wouldn't have it. You wouldn't have ever had me voting for it from here. And my ward didn't vote for it anyway. And the reason they didn't is that this is a perfect example of why they don't. They voted for this thinking that there were parks and there were trails and there were sidewalks. And what have we been talking about ever since it happened? The convention center. That's all we talk about. I was shocked when I saw this MAPS Advisory Board book that had a tab for the convention center, for the wellness center, and didn't have anything behind it. I don't mean to be accusatory. I think you're responding to the pressures that you have to live with. But the pressure that we have to live with are the constituents that voted and they were in favor. They were heavily in favor of the wellness center. They were heavily in favor of more sidewalks. They were heavily in favor of the trails. They were not in favor of the convention center. By itself, it would never be on this list. We've got an obligation to respond to that. We look exactly like we're being accused of looking. That it doesn't really matter what the voter thought was a good deal. You put the convention center on, you put the wellness center on, the wellness center drags the convention center on, and then you build the convention center. Or you put your emphasis on the convention center. Just from a public policy standpoint, it seems to me we ought to be talking about those things that we know were popular with the voters. The sidewalks, the trails, and the wellness centers were the things that were the most popular. The river, I think, was next. And the river has its constituency, and it's going to be well taken care of. I think we ought to get on with doing the things I think it does two things. It goes back to the things the voter was most fond of, and secondly, they are not everything that's within 50 yards of the Chamber of Commerce office. It's something that's outside that circle. And I think we've got an obligation to do something about that. To change that view that the public has of how we operate.
Gary?
Well, I don't see this as an either or pick one or the other. Everybody understands, let me back up. A lot of people understand that the convention center is being discussed right now because, if nothing else, the location of it is so critical to many other things that are going on in the city, not the least of which would be the transit system and the streets and all kinds of things. So I don't think that it's a negative that the convention center is being discussed right now. Not only that, it's the largest piece of this whole thing. It's going to take the longest to build, and there's no reason why you can't at least start discussing it and start dealing with the design of it's going to take a long time and the building of it's going to take a long time. But having said that, there's no reason why there shouldn't be a committee somewhere already looking at the senior centers, because there is such a lack of information on it. If we have one of the projects, which apparently we do, the senior center, that nobody seems to know not only where they're going to go, but what they're going to look like or how much they're going to cost, why aren't we putting a focus right now to get that information? How can the MAPS advisory group give us a proposed timing schedule of the events if they don't know how much they're going to cost or where they're going to be or what the land acquisition is or anything else? So I'll just say again, I don't think it's a one or the other concept, but it has become apparent in this conversation that the senior centers are the ones that have the least information available for what we hope is a soon-to-come schedule out of the MAPS Advisory Committee. So if there's why we may want to look at suggesting that they put that subcommittee for the senior centers out of the MAPS Advisory Group together and get them working on the very things, the kind of information that the entire committee will need to make that scheduling decision and financing decision.
Well, we can certainly do that. I've been working on the subcommittees and can certainly get the Senior Wellness Center subcommittee done sooner rather than later. But again, first thing I said when we started this conversation, we cannot do everything at once. And at the same time, let's let the advisory board do its job. And so to a certain amount, we're having a lot of conversation here that I think we're speaking to the advisory board when we're speaking. And I think that's important that they understand, so we're working together. Yeah, Larry?
Yeah, as a member of the advisory board, Eric, we have our next meeting when?
It's next Thursday.
Next Thursday. If I got one thing, and I think if Eric got one thing, the sentiment from the council is you want attention given to the wellness centers, and you want a process started to make sure that the wellness centers receive a very high priority at this particular time. Is that what you're getting out of this, Eric?
I am.
And I will guarantee to you, okay, that I will communicate that sentiment to the advisory committee next Thursday.
Okay. Now, back to the matter at hand, the program coordinator for MAPS 3. Any comments or questions specifically to Eric's request today that we approve them moving forward on the project coordinator?
What's the cost of this?
It's not determined. It'll be finalized in the negotiation process when we fully develop the scope of services. So the action today is no cost to the council. It's merely to advertise for consulting services utilizing the selection procedure, seeking those that are qualified and going through an interview process to bring back additional information and a contract at a future meeting.
Second, with this comment, I would like a memorandum or something on the next council meeting, 2 weeks from now, about the results of this next advisory board meeting that Larry's going to advocate our position and what we've done to try to get that moving along.
I'd be happy to do so.
All right. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Eric, thanks. All right, on to item 8P. We're refinancing some of the revenue bonds at city's golf courses, getting a better interest rate than they currently have. Comments or questions? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8Q is a salary continuation for public safety official. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8R, I understand we do need executive session on this item?
No, we do not.
We do not. Okay, how about a motion then? Cast your votes. Do not need executive session. And item S, I understand we do not need executive session?
Correct, do not.
All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item T, do we need executive session on that? We do not.
We don't.
Okay, how about a motion? And a second. Cast your votes on 8T. Passed unanimously. Item 8U. We do not need executive session. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8V has been struck. Item 8W. Do we need executive session?
Yes, we do.
We do need executive session. All right. How about a motion? All right. Cast your votes. That item's moved to executive session. Item 8X is claims recommended for denial. Is there anyone here wishing to speak on any item listed under 8X? All right, how about a motion? Oh, we do have someone. Okay. Good morning, and I will need your name and address for the record.
Nathaniel Haskins, 507 Northwest 19th Street.
Okay, and you're here to speak on which item, Nathaniel?
Item G, Jackie Morris, I found out last minute, that's my landlord. She was not able to be here. She filed the claim. I don't know if we want to continue this or if that's even an option, but I can just tell you, in the response that we received from the city recommending in denial, well, let me give you some background. What happened is there was a flooding that caused approximately $4,000 in damages. Most of those items were my wife's books and personal effects. The flooding, the city is alleging in the recommendation for denial was a cause of a substantial significant storm, which in the legal context would be an act of God that was not the fault of the city. But what we have alleged is my landlord, Jackie, did not know there was a drain there. The drain was being covered by a heater, and there was no back prevention pump that could have avoided the whole problem. We were never notified by the city that there was even a drain there, and had we been notified, there should have been a back prevention pump, and we should have at least been warned to put one in. And so we're alleging that our landlord didn't know, and we didn't have the opportunity to possibly prevent this loss from occurring.
Give me some more information. What is this, a city facility?
No, this is a quadplex in Mester Park. It's a 4-unit home. The basement is not occupied, but there's a lot of storage down there, and we are the only primary tenants that had storage stuff down there. Us and the landlord. The landlord had some washers and dryers, et cetera, down there.
Let's get some legal advice here from our staff that will inform us whether or not we have the legal opportunity to pay or not pay. Yes.
Hi, Amy Harrison, Municipal Counselor's Office. This was during the time of the rainstorm on June 14th, where we had a large amount of flooding. As far as the drain in the basement of the fourplex, the city would have no, as far as I know, no knowledge of whether there was a drain in there and whether it had a pump or anything like that. Anything related to the private lines is strictly a private problem.
Yeah, that's what it would seem to me, too. Is there a reason for you to believe that the city has a responsibility here on this?
Well, I think there's a city ordinance. I think it's Section 47-12 that requires a backflow pump because we're lower than the next, up the street, the next water main. The property is situated a little bit below there, and it requires a backwater pump. I don't know the answer to that specific legal question. That would have been Jackie, who unfortunately can't make it. But the other legal question is proximate cause, which is if this case were actually litigated, we'd have to prove whether the backflow pump would have prevented the actual damage. That would be the other question. But I don't know the answer to that question.
The backflow preventer is part of the plumbing code, and it's a requirement that either in new construction or the owner of the property has to have installed.
It's something that we require for someone else to put in, right?
Correct. Yes,
so
it's a private
it's something
issue.
that we require Jackie, in this case, who's not here to defend herself, but
absolutely.
But by the information you're providing, it's something that she should have had in there. So I mean, it's not as if the city could give notice to what she should or should have. She should be telling us, or someone who represents her should be putting that in. That's
right. She would say,
legal
what
advice.
she said is, I'm sorry to interrupt. What she said is that she had no knowledge there was even a drain there to put there. I agree that it is that with your citation to the requirement that there's a backflow pump there, but the problem is we didn't know the drain was there. It was hidden, and there was no notice given to the landowner that this even existed.
Yeah.
Do you have insurance? Do you not have insurance?
I have insurance, but don't have flood insurance, unfortunately.
Oh, right.
Well,
I have renter's insurance.
By state law, does the council have discretion on whether or not to pay this claim?
No.
You see our problem. State law does restrict municipalities and the elected officials from paying on claims like this. Because she's not here, and we can continue that item, but I can't imagine that there's going to be new information that's going to change the legal facts of what you're telling me. So it's your call. We can leave it on, or if you want us to delay it a couple of weeks, I don't know if there'd be any harm in that.
I'll default to the council.
Okay. We'll leave it on then. Thank you very much.
Leave it on. Okay.
Any other comments or questions on claims recommended for denial? All right, we have a motion and a second. All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 9 is claims recommended for approval. Is there any item listed under item 9? All right. Cast your votes on item 9. Passed unanimously. Item 10 is a final hearing on the recommendations for new ordinances if necessary as a result of our tax task force. Hard to say. Sam, you were working on this. Any comments today?
Mayor, I think it's done everything that the council asked us to look into, specifically addressing refusal of services and making it easier for smaller and new companies to get licensed.
Okay.
Would move approval.
Okay. Any comments or questions then on item 10A? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 10B has been deferred until August 31st. Item 10C is a fee adjustment, kind of cleans up some of the vehicular trafficking resolutions that we have in place.
Yes, Mayor. This was a very comprehensive partnership of work between police, fire, public works, and development services and our legal department, Ms. Cindy Richards. So I believe we now have a parking ordinance that has some conformity to it as it relates to, being basically a fair assessment as it relates to different parts of our city in reference to parking. And so I would ask that this be passed as it stands now.
Councilman, we need that. If you want that motion to amend on the fine after arraignment date for the 15 days, that motion needs...
Oh, yes. In light of all the grief that I've received behind this, I have went out and asked that the time frame for the payment of a parking citation be extended to, is it additional 5 days?
That's correct.
Yes.
So about 15 days.
And I believe there was a administrative issue that had to be clarified. So I'll let you explain that, Cindy, because I'm kind of...
On the column for the parking schedule of fines, there's a column that has the fine amount, and then there's an additional column for the fine to be increased after a certain period of time. Currently, it says the fine after 10 days. We would like the language at the top of that column to change to fine after arraignment date, with the understanding that the court administrator will set those arraignment dates out 15 days from the date of violation. So fine after arraignment date would be the motion to amend.
Okay. So we ask that it be amended to the fine after the arraignment date, and the arraignment date now will be 15 days.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
All right.
Amended.
Vote on the motion. Passed unanimously. We need to vote on the motion entirely. Is that good?
Yeah, we need number 2, the ordinance.
Okay. How about a motion on item 10C2? 8, 10. 1 and 2 be passed. All right. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Thanks, Skip.
You already, that is the amendment that's on the agenda. That was the amendment.
All right. City manager reports.
We have a couple of city manager reports in your packet this morning, but the first one is a presentation of the findings of the ULI advisory panel that was here earlier this year to take a look at the Court Shore plan and some of the city's progress and projects that are going on in that area, and to make some recommendations and give us some more ideas about the implementation of that plan. And Russell Klaus, the planning director, is here this morning to do a brief presentation about that.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. Just by way of introduction, a little further introduction on that, we were approached by former Mayor Kirk Humphreys, who thought that it would be a good idea for us to bring in some independent analysis of the Court Shore plan, considering the scope and the time frame and the cost of implementation of the plan. He really felt, and we agreed with him, that it would be useful to provide outside expert advice on the plan, the scope of the plan, the intent of the plan, and then the content of the plan. So we owe our appreciation to Kirk because he raised half of the funds required to pay for ULI. We paid for the other half, but he was able to raise those funds from private sources, and we really appreciate him doing that for us. The ULI was here in March, and I know that several of the council people interviewed with the panel members, and I appreciate your time. There were a lot of different stakeholders who interacted with the ULI while they were here, more than 80 people, and as well as people who attended the public hearings, the public meetings, even more there. So there were a lot of people who have an interest in this report, and I'm very happy today to be able to present what the findings of the report are. AJ have you handed out? You've handed out the copies. Has handed out a hard copy of this. We only received this last week or the week before, so we haven't had a lot of time to review it. But I think the first and foremost thing here is that the ULI really found the plan to be a great plan. They agreed with the scope and the vision of the plan. They thought it was something that was quite adventurous in terms of the scale of a planning effort in any metropolitan area, but the fundamental principles of the plan they considered to be very sound. They came up with 5 big ideas from the plan that they agreed with. The Harvey Spine, that connection between downtown and the river, which is the whole premise behind the Court of Shore process. They thought that that was an excellent organizing principle for development of the plan. They also strongly agreed with the provision of the open space system that is included in the plan, Central Park, Promenade Park, and also engaging with the waterfront. They thought that those were very important elements in terms of supporting the rest of the plan. The convention center and the hotels they considered an important initiative for Oklahoma City to pursue because that raises our profile as a destination city and is important for us for a number of reasons, particularly relating to economic development. They strongly supported the large amount of residential that comprises most of the plan area. They felt that that was important for supporting what we're already doing in the core component of the city, and they felt that this area was an ideal place to locate a lot of that residential. And then they also encouraged us to take advantage of the connection when we make that with the river eventually. They felt that the plan by bringing the river into that larger urban core area was a very important part of the future of Oklahoma City. They recommended 9 implementation priorities, and I think the key thing with this list is that we are actually engaged in most of these already, or were before the ULI even got here. So the Convention Center Hotel, that's part of the MAPS process, and we've already had some discussion on that this morning. The Boulevard, they considered an important part of the plan as the Central Park, and we are working with ODOT in terms of the construction of the Boulevard. Central Park, we've already engaged consultants to give us a concept plan for that, and that'll obviously be part of the MAPS Advisory Board's purview as well. Street and streetscape improvements, some of those were included in the GO bond. And since this is a long-term plan, something that was emphasized by the ULI several times during the report, they wanted to reiterate that this is going to take us a long time to put into place, and said 50 years on multiple occasions. So we have future opportunities to be able to fund the rest of those improvements related to those street improvements they're recommending. Residential development west of Central Park, the City Council has already authorized the Urban Renewal Authority through the acquisition plan to be able to acquire property 1 block east and west of the park. So that is at hand. We don't have the funds for that yet, but at least we're moving towards sort of laying the foundation for that. Relocation of OG&E lines. There are a lot of overhead lines in the Court of Shore area, as well as a major substation there just east of the park. And we have been working with OG&E now for some time, well over a year, in terms of determining what the logistics are for that relocation. And that will be part of the MAPS Advisory Board's considerations as well. They felt that the river's edge, because of that, the attractiveness of water, was an important place to look at for residential development, and make a further recommendation in the report that we should integrate, or do a better job of integrating the Court Shore plan with the MAPS, with the River Master Plan, and that we should revisit the River Master Plan to become a little more proactive in terms of that redevelopment along the river. And the Central Park, the residential east of Central Park, I've already mentioned. Now, they did have a number of differences with the plan, and these are the major ones. They were fairly aggressive about their feelings on the location of the convention center, and did not believe that that should go east of the Central Park. They proposed that it would be better located east of the rail line over there on the lumberyard site. But they were only here for 2 days and did not look at all the pros and cons of either site. And so that is a process that will be taken care of through the MAPS Advisory Board. So there's a lot more work to be done, and in fact they did say that a lot more study needs to be done in terms of determining that location. They did believe that the boulevard, as proposed in the Court Shore plan, needs to be narrower, and they proposed a width of about 110 feet there. It still gives us the 6 lanes that ODOT requires, and they recommended that 2 of those lanes be used for parking, so that it is a much more pedestrian-friendly street, and they consider that important. They also felt that the mixed-use development that was proposed on the north side of the boulevard, the Court Shore plan had that including office development, a potential hotel, and destination retail. They did not believe that destination retail would work in this location for several reasons. It was in the wrong location, and that it did not have the benefit of having development on the other side of the street, because the park is on the other side of the street, and they recommended that that kind of retail would be better located in Bricktown. They suggested that the boulevard was more suited to cafes and smaller restaurants in that location, and they also recommended that kind of neighborhood retail throughout the Court Shore area. For that same reason, they did not believe, because of the office vacancies we currently have and the construction of Devon Tower, that there wouldn't be a market for new office development, although they did sort of provide a caveat there that if there was a build-to-suit operator that we could possibly accommodate that. And that is still a good site for that, but they didn't see that as anything occurring in the foreseeable future. The river I've already talked about. And they also recommended Promenade Park, reducing the width of that. They didn't recommend. We'd asked them in the questions for them to answer whether the Promenade Park was in the right location, and they suggested, well, leaving it where it is, but perhaps narrowing it by activating all of Robinson and having residential on both sides of that street. And that's something that we can consider. It is several years away. We're going to focus on the north of the new I-40 alignment, so it's going to be a while before we get to that. These are the recommendations on our investment priorities. In terms of the residential neighborhoods, that we will have to put more planning effort into each of those particular neighborhoods as we move forward with them, and I think the first priority is going to be east and west of Central Park. Land use and design regulations, in order to secure the kind of quality that the Court Shore plan anticipates, they strongly recommended that we develop design guidelines or design standards for the area, and recommended such tools that are being used in other places like Trinity River in Fort Worth, for example, pattern books, which are kind of a recipe for the kind of development that you require in an area. Acquisition of land, which is already underway. Basic infrastructure already underway, at least for the foreseeable future, for the first 10 years of implementation of the plan, and then beyond that, we would have to look at other measures. Supportive financing techniques, and several of these initiatives, obviously the park, in terms of its long-term maintenance, is going to require some creative financing techniques, which is part of a public-private partnership that we anticipate there. And they did mention public-private partnerships on several occasions, also in relation to the development of residential, because the kind of residential, the quality of residential that we're anticipating in the Quarter Shore area is probably going to require some kind of assistance to enable that to happen, at least in the short term. Over the longer term, we anticipate that the market will take over at that point. But to get this going, they're anticipating that we're going to have to develop some fairly creative partnerships there to make that happen. Next steps, and they did not provide any kind of priority or time frame for the implementation of these, just things that need to be done in order to be able to implement the plan. An open space plan, there's a lot of open space in Quarter Shore. What they're talking about is integrating that together, coordinating it so that the functions that open space provides for that area is maximized and optimized, not only in relation to the plan area, but also its connection to downtown and the open space we have there. So if we were going to do that open space plan, I would anticipate that we would roll all of it together and look at how it serves the city and what its long-term future should be. They recommended a downtown access and circulation plan, since we're changing access into downtown drastically with the new I-40 alignment and with the boulevard, that we look at how we use that in terms of circulating traffic in the downtown area. Part of that is being addressed through Project 180, but there's a lot of area outside of Project 180 that is not encompassed by that, so they're looking at a larger plan. I mean, we're a long way along on that effort, but there's still more work to do. Integrating the river plan with Quarter Shore, I'd already mentioned, the neighborhood plans for each residential district, a streetscape master plan, and this is also part of tying the whole area together so that there is a united approach with streetscape as a great way of unifying districts, and also important for connecting that north to south and east to west. And then design quality I'd already mentioned as well. As I said, they stress that this will take a long time to implement. They stress that we be flexible. We have enough work to do for the next several years in terms of the first phases of implementation, but the market will change, and we need to be flexible to that. They just stress that when we do that, that we stay true to the core principles of the plan, which is the open space network, the Harvey Spine, the quality of the residential development, et cetera. And then they also recommended that we be more aggressive in terms of marketing and branding. As we go forward with this, we're going to have to because it's such a large project and such a complex product to sell, that we're going to have to be fairly aggressive about the way we brand the area and the way we market the area. And in order to do that, to steward this whole process through and to carry that through, the fact that all of us are probably not going to be here in 50 years, that there would be a new institution, a new entity created to be able to oversee the plan's implementation over the long time. They had a number of other additional recommendations. These weren't, they're sort of supplemental to their 5 big ideas, and I found some of these interesting. I-40, they recommended that we have additional crossings there between Shields and Weston. You only have Walker and Robinson and the pedestrian bridge, and with the scale of the barrier that I-40 still creates, they recommended strongly that we include additional crossings, both vehicular and pedestrian, in that area. They also suggested that perhaps we enhance the boulevard, add some appeal to that by providing some additional feature at the connection with Harvey Spine, with the Harvey Spine, through a monument or some other feature in the road there, so that it catches people's attention. They also recommended extending it west, and I don't know if that is actually feasible, but it's a nice idea. They stressed, because we've got this connection between Quarter Shore and we've got that north-south, we put the emphasis on that, not to lose sight of the fact that we also need to make sure that people are able to move east-west within the Quarter Shore area, particularly since we're going to have that large spine of open space there, that there's a clear capacity to connect from east to west. Arts and cultural facilities, and this is probably a recommendation you're going to see in any downtown planning effort, These are extremely important for the diversity of what downtown has to offer, but also for the character of the neighborhoods. And they stressed that ensuring that we create a different character for each of these neighborhoods is really important to their sustainability and to their attractiveness for people who want to live in the area. Education they considered important. There was a school proposed within the Court Shore plan, but they recommended that we extend beyond that we address daycare. They believe that we could create about 2,000 housing units in the area. That's going to require school basically from birth through to college. They like the idea that UCO is in the downtown area. At that point in time, OCU was still on the table, and they recommended that those higher ed facilities really add to the attractiveness of downtown and to these particular neighborhoods. Long-term maintenance of the open space areas in there, and we've looked at different vehicles for how that will be done. They like the fact that if we're going to build a new convention center, that the old convention center we should retain until such time as it's functionally or economically obsolete. That gives us an advantage in terms of the additional space it provides as well as the arena there. So we should hang on to that as long as that building is going to stay upright. They believe that the residential should primarily be rental, and looked at a ratio of about 50 to 60% rental. And then extending the river into the residential area, which was another thing that the Court Shore plan had anticipated, was taking advantage of the proximity to the river and that access to the shoreline, and so extend that further into the residential areas, even more so than even the Court Shore plan had anticipated. So that's a whirlwind quick summary of the report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I would like to thank staff. AJ put a lot of effort into the document that was provided to ULI to inform them before they came here. They thought that report was one of the best they've ever seen, and I think we did an excellent job. Urban Redevelopment Division did an excellent job of providing them everything they needed to be able to make the determinations that they've done, and as well again to the Mayor and Council and to all the stakeholders who interacted with the ULI, and especially to Kirk.
All right. Sam?
Russell, was the group, with the importance they placed on the north-south spine, I guess running from the Myriad Gardens south to the river and encouraging future residential development either side, and then enhancing the river at that juncture, were they asked to address any considerations for transit running that direction of that spine, the trolley specifically?
We did not ask them specifically. They're very they like to keep it to a fairly tight set of questions that they have to answer. So in our initial analysis of the things we would like them to look at, we had about 80 questions, I think, that the ULI had come up with, and they asked us to narrow that down to 5 or 6. So we did do some condensation of issues into those questions.
I just asked
we did not specifically ask about transit.
Because of the importance that they put on that spine. Has that been any part of the discussions, as far as you know, with the transit meetings?
It has been. I think, it's hard for me to speak to that, but I think with an understanding that because this is a long-term development proposal, that we would just do the initial phase that would anticipate potential expansion into that area, which is what we have always thought as we've gone through the Court Shore plan.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on the ULI? Yes.
Quick question, just to make sure I understood. When you were talking about the differences, on that slide on the differences, did I hear you correctly that the ULI board, or advisors, whatever you want to call them, recommended that the convention center not be located within the Central Park?
Adjacent to the Central Park, yes.
Adjacent, that there should be another location considered for that.
I think what they discussed was putting the convention center on the west side of the tracks and the convention. The hotel on the west side of the tracks and the convention center on the east side of the tracks, which is an idea that had not been brought up before.
And then I guess, will the advisory committee have a briefing from you all on this report? Because it does speak to both the park and to the convention
That has
center.
not been scheduled. We will. Kathy.
Any other comments or questions on this report? All right. Thank you, Russell.
Okay. We had a couple of other reports in your packet that I just wanted to call your attention to. The first one has to do with chickens within residentially zoned areas, an issue that's come up several times before, and the report proposes a way for us to address that issue. And then the other one is the home inspection program that has come up in the past as well. So if you have any questions or comments about either of those, we'd be glad to try to answer them.
I'd like to just comment on, it's been several months, on the backyard chickens. I think, and I'd like to suggest that we move forward on staff's report. I think it's a very reasonable approach on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood petition basis to utilize an overlay zoning district such as our urban conservation districts. I understand that they could be augmented or amended, those existing urban conservation districts, if the neighborhood went through the same process, to augment their existing district to include this. If they aren't an urban conservation district, it would take a separate overlay district similar. But these urban conservation districts, I live in one in Cleveland, have been around 25 to 30 years, and I think have stood the test well. If a neighborhood were to come forward with a petition for a separate, as being suggested here, a separate overlay district, and I'm going to use Sarah Braden, who's with us today, and brought this to us months and months ago. If we used such a mechanism, an overlay district, it would very specifically spell out, and I'm just using some of the parameters that Sarah proposed, that there'd be a maximum defined in the overlay of chickens allowed. She was suggesting no more than 8 as a reasonable approach. There would be no roosters permitted, period. Chickens would be provided with a hen house and a fenced outdoor enclosure. And the hen house or fenced outdoor enclosure shall be located no closer than so many feet to any dwelling unit. She has suggested 20. Other cities have used other. But that kind of detailed limitation would be spelled out in each of the districts. And they would need to gather greater than 50% signatures within their defined legal neighborhood boundaries. So it really puts the onus on neighborhood by neighborhood with very specific requirements and limitations and restrictions that the neighbors would have before them and would have to agree to. And we go forward, I would like to suggest Sarah Braden's neighborhood happens to be in Ward 2, be the first neighborhood to try this out and be our trial neighborhood if she's so inclined and the neighbors are. But I would like to see us proceed with the staff.
So you're suggesting neighborhood by neighborhood could somehow apply?
That's one way.
Be a part of it?
I mean, we could initiate, I understand by the way this is drafted, council could initiate it, planning commission could initiate it, or simply a neighborhood could petition the planning commission and the council with greater than 50% signature for their neighborhood.
In the discussion of this proposal, which I think maybe has some merit, in my ward I've had mixed reactions to the idea of chickens, but what if you were in a neighborhood that was adjacent to a neighborhood that approved chickens? And how would you have a voice in, living next door to, or backyard to a chicken raising operation? I'm I don't know how wide a net we'd have to spread, but it seems like if you just look at an isolated neighborhood, you've got neighborhoods adjacent to it that might not want chickens. And I just hope that we could consider the impact on all our citizens, not just the ones who live in that district.
Councilman Ryan, when we enact, if we do an overlay district like we're talking, it'll be a separate zoning district classification, and notice is given to all people within 300-foot boundary of that district. And if more than 50% of the people in that 300-foot notification district protest, then it requires a supermajority of the council.
There is a mechanism in place to allow the adjacent neighborhoods to have some voice.
Yes, sir.
Wouldn't we consider doing the same thing for dogs? Or cats, maybe? I don't know why we're trying to love this thing to death. We ought to just put it up or put it down. Well, I mean, this is a way to not do it. I mean, if everybody would consider whether you want to do it for dogs and do it for chickens and dogs at the same time, then you'd get a real read on what people think about it. But to just single out chickens when we've already, people that were opposed to it actually conducted a poll that they had to come back and announce that they were sorry the results of the poll after they did the poll, because the poll came out that most people in Oklahoma City favored chickens with restrictions. And now we're going to try to make it more difficult to do it. I mean, look in your front yard tomorrow, and if you have dogs in your neighborhood, and see if you find any evidence that the dog was there. You know, you could do, the chickens are not going to do that. I don't know. If we want to do it, we ought to do it. If we don't want to do it, the idea of loving it to death here is not a good, I'm not in favor of that. I mean, it's just not, it just doesn't seem to me good public policy to just, everybody, I'd be for it if we throw dogs into it, for sure.
Well, if a council person wants to proceed with the resolution, I suggest they get with the city manager and bring something to the rest of the council. Fair enough? This is it.
Basically, what we're proposing to do is use the existing provisions that are in the city code for urban conservation districts, and that they could set up an urban conservation district with restrictions and provisions that would allow for chickens. Well, you can already have dogs. You can already have dogs.
Urban district that you could, if people didn't want dogs, they could get rid of dogs.
I mean, you're going to get mail.
I guess we could do that.
Is your wife out of town? Is your wife out of town today?
No, she's not out of town. But we don't get public television in the area that I live in, so I don't. It's a point. I'm making a point. I'm making a point. It's not an anti-dog statement. It is I'm making a point statement.
Larry?
My ward is very similar to Pete's ward in that we have inner city, and then we also have a lot of rural areas. And I can tell you now, and so I'll put the council on notice to expect a no vote, because the people in the city portion of my ward would be opposed, partially to the reason that Pat was talking about. They had joined other neighborhoods, but my ward, to this point, does not want chickens in Oklahoma City. So I just go on record with that.
How do you square that with a poll result?
By going to meetings, neighborhood meetings, time and time again. I have yet to find a proponent of chickens in Ward 3 in the inner city area. If they're out there, I'm open to hear from them. Please contact me, 761-6555. But the poll that I've taken face-to-face says no chickens in Ward 3 in the residential areas.
Pete, in all fairness, that survey where people were in favor, they were really in favor only with significant amount of restrictions. It wasn't just, I want chickens and roosters. It was, I'd be willing to have them if we have a small amount, if they're in a cage, if they're fenced in, if they're, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's a teeny bit unbalanced in it. And I'm speaking for Ward 6. I have a big problem here as well. I don't think my inner city neighborhoods really want chickens. I do know that I have some neighborhoods that have chickens currently. that are probably in violation of the ordinance. So it's a complicated issue for me. I think there, potentially is some merit in letting a neighborhood try it and see what happens. I think Mrs. Braden's going to find it fairly difficult to get 50% of her neighbors to vote for this, and those surrounding, because I share Councilman Ryan's issue that I don't want to be next door to a neighborhood that's voted for chickens if it's across my fence. So,
all right.
I just have a concern, at the risk of raising another point by Pete. Some of us have learned not to answer your point, Pete. It works out better that way. But the original time, back when we first discussed this and it came up, we had a concern, as I remember, of enforcement of this and the staff's ability to enforce it, if it was allowed, even with the restrictions that were put on the survey. I'm not sure allowing a whole neighborhood to do it under a district alleviates my concern about staff's ability to enforce it. You're still going to have the same enforcement issues, although it may be a smaller group. If the neighborhoods have to approve it, I'm not sure how many neighborhoods they could get 50% sign on to. But I just, again, want to, as I recall, there was an enforcement issue concern when we first discussed this also.
Any other comments on city manager reports regarding chickens?
In reference to that, how would you enforce this?
Well, the same way we enforce other things.
It would be enforced on a complaint basis, like other violations of the city code. It would be a zoning code violation, and it would also involve probably enforcement actions by animal control as well. So all of those kinds of activities are in one department, but it would require staff that both does zoning code inspections and possibly involvement from animal welfare.
So if a person made a complaint that the individual had 50 chickens or 20 chickens as opposed to, how many is the ordinance that they're proposing?
There is, each neighborhood would propose restrictions and requirements that would be unique to that neighborhood. So let's say it was 5 chickens and they had 50, then they would be in violation and they'd receive a notice.
So every overlay or every district that passed an overlay could have as many chickens as they agreed to have in the overlay. Is that right?
I imagine that we will review it on a staff level and put some restrictions, be a reasonableness test to how many chickens you can have and things like that.
Yeah. The only city I've talked to directly, because I've had it for some years, is Tulsa. And what their, after several years, experience has been, and what they probably are going to do in the revision of that ordinance, they've allowed roosters. That's been their issue. It's not been general enforcement. And that has not been an outcry. Roosters has been. They haven't yet rescinded it, but they're looking to go back and do that. Again, we've had the 5-4 vote even after the petition, Planning Commission and Council, plus the neighborhood protest. I would just ask again that it's going to be obviously a trial and limited basis to begin with, and that we proceed with what we have.
Okay. Any other city manager reports? All right. We have other opportunities for council to speak. I didn't go do a round robin after we introduced those ordinances before. Gary, you have anything? Sam, you want to speak about the task force on bicycle safety that you and I are working on?
Yes. As a result of the couple of fatalities here recently, there's just been an increased call from citizens about what are we going to do to respond. And I don't know what we're going to do to respond, but it just, in terms of an opportunity to raise public consciousness about safety, bicycle safety, both from the standpoint of the bicyclist as well as the car, both sides. That I talked with the mayor about just a short-term task force of people that have a real vested interest in this, both sides. I'd like M.T. Berry, who is a bicycle advocate himself, but understands fully the safety concerns from both standpoints. Be part of that we get a good objective look, and maybe some thoughts or recommendations to council that we haven't thought about with respect to public safety.
Okay. Larry?
I'd just like to briefly praise the Friends of Northwest 10th Street, Ruth Gordon, Joey Allen, Greg Pruitt, the other volunteers from the Friends of Northwest 10th Street. This past Saturday, they put on a back-to-school fair out at the DHS office on North Rockwell, where they had a number of activities for the kids to come by. They had free immunizations going on. They had the police there, the fire there. They had dogs. They had horses. They had clowns. They were taking names to give back-to-school packs that will be delivered to the kids. And in the course of that meeting out there, that event, Joe Kitchens, the superintendent of schools from Western Heights, was out there with his grandson and mentioned a very encouraging thing, that in the most difficult school in the Western Heights School District, the academic achievement has been raised significantly through a joint partnership. We're talking about partnerships earlier with senior centers. This was a partnership for after-school mentoring with the YMCA of Bethany had come in, and they're having fantastic results with probably one of the most challenged neighborhoods anywhere in Oklahoma City. So hats off to the Friends of Northwest 10th Street for the positive influence that they're trying to have in that challenged area. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Pete? All right, Meg? Skip?
Mayor, I would like to thank the staff for the City of Oklahoma City and their help in arranging and organizing the flood risk reduction recovery forum that was held at the Metrotech on August the 12th. I'd like to thank Councilman Ryan for his participation of being there, and Dennis Clowers for emceeing, and our city manager, Mr. Jim Couch. The participants were from FEMA, the Small Business Administration, Mr. Frank Barnes from the Oklahoma City Emergency Management Office. And what was interesting, although there was a great amount of fear that things would get out of hand and people would be very challenging in reference to some of the losses that they had as a result of the June and the July floods. But surprisingly, it was a very organized presentation and a very educational forum in which people received a lot of information that's been misinformation as it relates to flood insurance, as it relates to the process of applying for funds through the Small Business Administration. And what was interesting is that I think most people left with one thing, that they had thought they were going to blame the City of Oklahoma City for a lot of the tragedy, but in fact, a lot of them were blaming the insurance companies.
Okay. Pat?
Your Honor, just a question on the bicycle thing. I guess I get a lot of calls because of the popularity of Lake Hefner as a bicycling area. Calls from both bicyclists and drivers, car drivers. And do our ordinances require a bicycle rider to use a bicycle trail or path if it's available?
I don't believe so. But they can use the street. I believe the ordinances require them to comply with city traffic laws.
I understand that, but the comment I've had on several occasions is that drivers are concerned about impediment the bicyclists might present to traffic flow when there is a bicycle trail available that they're not using. So I just curious if there was any requirement. There is none, so the bicyclists are totally within their rights to ride on the streets. Okay, thank you.
All right. Citizens to be heard. Has anyone signed up? All right. We have executive session. We'll be back. Do you have someone? Yes, sir. That's all right. Come forward. We'll need your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Charles Reinhardt. I live at 3333 Northwest 25th. And I'm blind, it's obvious. And I wonder if the city manager is here, because I have a question.
He is not here, but Kathy O'Connor is assistant city manager, and she's in today.
I attended the Central Oklahoma Park and Transportation Authority meeting a week ago last Friday. Showed the laws that prove every blind person, now you're not going to believe this, but it's true, all you got to do is go on a computer, the law is there. Every blind person or every disabled person in Oklahoma City is being discriminated against every single time he gets on a city bus. Says it black and white clear with all the attorneys y'all got. I can't believe a 65-year-old blind man can go on there and find the wording. The city manager told me at the end of that meeting, Mr. Reinhardt, if you're having trouble with doing discrimination, I think you should contact the League for the Blind or New Vision Oklahoma. When the law clearly states, nobody bothers to look it up, it's going to be proved to you, clearly states that the minute a disabled individual steps on the vehicle, from that point on, it's the bus driver's responsibility, the committee's responsibility, and ultimately the mayor's responsibility to see that I'm not discriminated against. And every single time for 10 years, there's a certain thing the driver's supposed to do. They do not know it. They do not have a clue. Their signage is in violation of federal law. And after I told all this to the council, to the committee, he says, call the League for the Blind. And I'm going to prove to every single one of you that he was completely wrong, and he violated my civil rights when he told me that. And that's all I have to say.
Thanks for coming down. We have executive session. We'll be back.